All right, so welcome everybody, and thank you for coming to the third of our workshops for the Innovative Idea Competition, but hopefully you'll find some value in them whether you're intending to enter the competition or not. This evening, we are going to be talking about, whoops, I got to share my screen. This evening, we're going to be talking about understanding and leveraging your competition. And again, this is the third workshop. The other two workshops were also recorded, and the slide decks are available in the shared resources folder. You should be or should have gotten an email today from the IEI with a link to that shared resources folder if you have pre-registered for the competition, or if you've attended any of the prior workshops, or if you've created a draft submission in the Startup Tree portal. So anybody that's expressed any interest in the program, you should have gotten that email today. If you didn't, just email the IEI when you get a chance, and then we'll send you the link to that shared resources folder. And there's lots of good information in there about the competition, some helpful tips, some documents that give you information on eligibility, copies of the slide decks from the previous workshops, and also tonight's slide deck will be going in there tomorrow. And then also links for the recorded workshops if you missed the prior workshops and you'd like to go back and watch them. We've been having some problems getting them up into YouTube and sharing that link with you, but we hope to have that solved no later than on Monday for sure. All right, so let's get started. So one of the things that I hear a lot is people will come to me and say, hey, I want to talk to you about my idea. And when we get to the discussion about competitors, I'll ask, so who are your competitors? And they'll go, oh, my idea, I don't have any competition. And I usually have to control myself because wrong. There is always some form of competition. All right, you may not know it, but there's always some type of competition that exists today. All right, and let's talk a little bit about what that might be or what that might look like. So first off, there's direct competitors, people who are doing the same thing you plan to do. Okay, they're going to offer us the same product or the same solution. All right, they may already be out in the marketplace, or they may be like you in the idea stage and getting ready to launch. Maybe they've put up a website to kind of feel out and validate their idea, but essentially they're the same as what you are. All right. There's also indirect competitors. Indirect competitors are people who are doing something similar, but not exactly the same. It might be that they are offering a product that will provide the same benefits, but it isn't exactly the same kind of product. So think in terms of like a pen and a pencil, right? A pen or a pencil's, really an indirect competitor, or you might have an iPad to record notes. It's recording, it's got a writing element to it that's different than, a pen or a pencil. You also have alternatives. All right, and alternatives are typically other ways of solving the problem that you've identified. All right, they're not doing it the same way that you plan to solve it. Okay, they have some other way of solving it, but it's typically not going to be optimal. It's typically not solving the problem to your customer's satisfaction. Okay, it might be okay, but it's not great. All right, and the customers would tell you that in most cases. You also have substitutes, all right? And that's something that could be completely different from what you're doing, all right? But it's still, again, solving the problem, all right? So for example, if you wanted to put a hole in your wall, all right, you might have a drill and a drill bit, and you might drill a hole through that wall. But another way to do that would be to simply take a hammer and a nail and use that nail to punch a hole through the wall. It's accomplishing the same thing. It's giving you the hole in the wall that you're looking for, right? But it's doing it in a completely different way than drilling the hole. And then last but not least, is the status quo. The status quo is really nothing more than if you were to go out and talk to people today, your intended customers today, about how they're solving this problem, they would tell you. And whatever they're doing is the status quo. It's how they solve the problem right now. Now, sometimes the status quo may be that they're using a direct competitor, or they're using an indirect competitor, or some other alternate or substitute, okay? But oftentimes, it's also just their homegrown solution, right? It's something they've come up with to solve the problem. It isn't necessarily something someone else is selling or offering, right? So these are all different ways that you have to stop and think about who your competitors might be. Because you're going to be offering a solution to a problem, you need to know what else is out there. What are you competing against? All right. So why? Why is that so important? Well, one of the reasons that's so important is because, again, you need to know who you're up against, right? What you're up against and who you're up against. Another reason, though, is because knowing who your competition is going to give you a lot of insights in a lot of different areas. All right. So first off, if they're your competitor and your customers may be using them, or at least some of your customers are using them, that's going to tell you what they're doing, right? You go out and you talk to your customers, you haven't done any research yet, but you talk to your customers and you ask them, what are you doing to solve this problem today? And they tell you, oh, I'm using, I'm using this particular backpack, or I'm using, a briefcase or something, some way of solving the problem of how they carry all their stuff from one place to another. Okay, they're going to tell you who the competitors are that you need to start looking into. And obviously, if you asked 50 customers, you might find out that most of them are all using one particular competitor, or you might find out that there are multiple competitors out there that they're using, multiple different brands that are providing the same product or solution to what you're doing. All right. You're also going to be able to see what customers like and what they don't like. So if you ask 50 customers and 40 of them are all using the same solution, that's pretty much an indication that that's the market leader, at least within that sampling of people, right? And all of the other competitors that may be out there, those other 10 people may have chosen one or two or maybe even 9 other competitors, right? Well, they're obviously not real popular if 50 or 40 of the 50 people are doing one thing and only 1 or 2 of these other people are using these other solutions. But it'll give you an indication as to, who they like and maybe who they don't like. It's also going to give you some indication as to what pricing strategies are being used, right? And that's important, because if you're going to take your idea and try to launch a business to solve a problem, all right, you need to understand how have your competitors priced their solution. Understanding, are they trying to price based on a differentiation model, meaning that they're very different and providing more value and therefore can command a higher price? Or are they taking more of a general mass market approach, right? And they're trying to go to be on the low end, the low price competitor, all right? Offering the basics of what solve the problem, of what customers want, and trying to have a low cost strategy. You need to know what your customers are doing, because you're going to need to figure out where you want to fit in. You also need to take a look at your competitors to see what are they doing in terms of their marketing strategy and their marketing channels. And then you also need to take a look at what their distribution channels are. So how are they getting their product or service to market? If it's a product, do they have their own website and they're selling online? Are they potentially selling through other retailers? So they might be selling it to boutique shops that are, offering the product. Maybe they have their own, like I said, brick and mortar location. They might be selling through Amazon or through Etsy. right? But knowing how they're selling it, how they're promoting it is important. Now, it tells you two things. One is it's a good indication, and it means that's something that you should consider as a possible strategy for you. But it also might be something where you might choose to take a completely different strategy and a completely different approach on how you reach those customers, right? And that would help to make you unique. So that would be a way to differentiate yourself from the competition. And the same thing with distribution channels, all right? It may be that, like I said, you might have your own brick and mortar store. You might want to sell through Amazon or Etsy. You might be selling your product at craft shows on the weekends, all right? Or if you're selling a service, right, a software as a service model, are you going to put it in the App Store, the Apple App Store, the Google Play Store? What's going to be your approach of how you offer that out? So I see a question here. How do we find out about the competition for this idea competition? So Sharon, again, you have an idea, right? And I always tell people the first three things they need to do with their idea is Google it, check on Amazon, and check on Alibaba, and check on the app stores. So depending upon your product or service, all right, if you're a service business, you're going to want to Google that. That's the most likely place you're going to find other service businesses. If it's software as a service and you're planning to do this through some kind of an app, check the app stores, the Apple App Store, the Google Play Store, and find out what other apps are out there and what are they offering? What kinds of benefits are they offering? What kind of problems are they solving, right? So the first three things you should be doing is Googling it, search Alibaba, search Amazon, and see what else is out there.
Alibaba spelled? I never heard of it before.
Google it.
Okay.
You'll find it. It's the largest worldwide marketplace for products.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Alibaba was launched out of China, and it's where a lot of the manufacturing, a lot of people find manufactured product from China that they want to bring to the U.S. and then they private label it or brand it and then sell it domestically here in the U.S. I think it's Alibaba.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Okay. So again, you want to check these things out because you need to know what your competitors are doing, and you need to know what methods are they using to connect to the same customers that you're going to be ultimately trying to connect to. All right. All right. Let me keep going. So you're also going to want to see, through looking at your competitors, can you learn about what industry best practices may be out there? Now, this is granted digging a little deeper. This is probably something that's maybe more appropriate for the Be Your Own Boss Bowl competition in the spring, all right? But if you have three primary competitors that you're going up against, and all three of those primary competitors are following basically the same strategy and the same cookie cutter approach to delivering their products and services, you're going to want to look to see, well, who's doing the best in each area of marketing, of distribution, of customer service and support. Your competitors will oftentimes be able to indicate and show you what the best practices are for delivering that product or solution to your customers. Now, ultimately, talking to your customers and finding out whether or not they really like it or not is going to be the absolute proof that that's the case. All right. You might see, and your competitors might be doing the same thing the same way, but maybe the customers aren't real happy with what they're getting from those competitors. All right. But it is an indication, looking at what competition is doing, as to what best practices might be. Another thing that it'll tell you is supply chains and partnership issues, okay? So all of your competitors, if you're making a product, for example, all of your competitors may be going to the same sources to get the materials that they need to make the product. And in which case that might give you some insights as to where you should be going to get that same supply, all right? Now, you may or may not want to buy your materials from the same sources that they're buying it from, but chances are that that's a good place for you to start, if for nothing else, just so that you can get a better understanding of what the costs might be for those materials to make your product. All right. And the same thing with partnerships. You'd want to look at what partners are your competitors using? And are they partners that you should also be trying to bring on board and build a relationship with? Or are they partners that, you know, maybe don't fit in with your brand, and therefore you want to steer clear with them? You don't want to be really associated with those partners because you've got better people in mind as to who you could connect to. But again, all factors as to why it's important to understand who your competition is and what they're doing. All right. So back to Sharon's question of, you know, how do you find out about your competitors? Well, there are a bunch of different ways to do that. All right. Typically, you're going to want to do some research. All right. And you're going to want to research your customers. All right. We talked about that kind of in the first workshop, where you need to know who's your target market or your target market segment. Who are your customers, right? And you want to know as much and learn as much about those people as possible. All right. So you are going to end up researching your customers, right? But you also want to be talking to your customers about your competitors. And that's why I started off on that other slide by saying, you know, it's important because by knowing who your competitors are, you're going to learn about your customers and vice versa. All right.
Sorry, can I stop you for a second?
Yeah.
I was specifically talking about, I thought I was on a wrong track. I was talking about the idea competition. When you was talking about knowing your competitors, I thought I was talking about knowing who's all entering the competition and knowing what they're doing. That's what I thought you were talking about. So I kind of was off the case, I guess. Not off the case, but kind of like.
Okay, so let me see. Let me try to restate your question. So you're asking, how do you find out about the other people that are entering the competition?
Yes, that's what I thought when you was like knowing your competitors. That's what I thought you were talking about.
No, I'm talking about if you have an idea that you want to enter into the competition, right? You're always going to have some form of competition.
Definitely. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm aware of that. Okay. I was sorry about that.
Yeah, no, that's okay. That's all right. Okay. So, you know, if you want to find out more about customers, you need to do research. You can use census data. You can do your own surveys, SurveyMonkey, or you know, do something through Facebook. There's lots of different ways to do surveys. Go out and talk to people, right? Get out, right? Get out of the building, go out and talk to people, the people that you think are most likely the people that are going to be your customers. Random people is pretty tough, right? So like if you were going to be selling a product for dogs, okay, one place you might want to go would be to a park where you might see people with their dogs walking their dogs, right? Because you'd be able to see it, be obvious, you'd know to go up and talk to them, ask them a couple questions, get the information you're looking for. That would be a whole lot better strategy than going to the mall and randomly asking people in the mall, oh, do you have a dog? Because you might have to ask 200 people before you find one that has a dog, right? But if you go to a park, it'd be kind of obvious if people are out there with their dogs. So, you know, talking to people, running these kinds of surveys, that's one way to get information about those customers, okay, about your potential customers. and understanding a better understanding about them. But we're talking about how do you find out information about your competitors to your product or your service. So the other places you can do is do some industry research. There are typically, within whatever industry you're talking about, there's some type of trade association data or industry data. There might be an industry association as well. You can, again, Google all those things. You could search for, Association for Photographers, okay, or trade journals on photography. You might find that there's the, U.S. National Photography League, and which wouldn't surprise me if there was, and go to their website where they might have all kinds of information about the photography industry and how you launch businesses in photography and the different kinds of photographic services, okay, businesses that are doing things in that industry. Another great place I would tell you to go is the Temple Business Library. So the Temple Business Library is inside the Temple Library. It's not a separate building. It's just a separate group of people, okay, who specialize on business. All right. The person that I often recommend is Adam Shambaugh. He's fantastic. He's a big supporter of the IEI. You can reach him through the Temple Library website. You can book time with him. He's the guy you'd go to say, hey, I've got an idea, and let's use photography. I've got an idea where I've got an idea for a product that professional photographers would just love. How do I get information about professional photographers? How many of them are there in the US? How many independent photographers? Are there photography trade associations? He can help you think through all the different kinds of searches to get that information. He might be able to tell you how much money is spent in that industry, how many you're in business, but how much, what was the gross revenue for all of those businesses for last year. Anything related to that kind of industry research, he is awesome. Another place you can go to is called BRIC, and that's the Business Resource Information Center at the Philadelphia Public Library. All right. I really recommend you go to the Temple Library first, because I think that they could probably help you with 90% of your inquiries and questions. All right. But BRIC is also a great resource for you. All right, I just see a question from Jose. How should we describe to our customers who our competitors are if they profess to not be aware of any other competitors? All right. You don't need to. You might ask people, how are you solving this problem today? And they would say, oh, I buy, or I'm using such and such service. So they're telling you who the competitor is that they're currently using. All right. But if you would go to a customer and say, how are you solving this problem today? And they go, oh, I don't really have a good solution. Or, oh, I've made my own little thing here at home, and that's what I use to solve this problem. Okay. Then, yeah, they're not going to tell you who the competitors are. You shouldn't expect them to tell you, right? Hopefully you've done some research and so you already have a pretty good idea. And I would not go to your customers and say, so tell me which competitors you're using. Instead, I would be asking, how are you solving this problem today? That's a much more open-ended question. And it's less, it puts them in less of a defensive position, right? Answering that question is a whole lot easier and more comfortable than tell me which competitors you're using, right? So yeah, I would take that kind of an approach when you're talking to a prospective customer, trying to learn from them about your competitor. All right. Okay, so let's go move on to the next categories, competitive information, right? So you can look at your competitors' websites, right? You can search for them, find out what information is out there. Again, you can, if you know who they are, you can actually look to see if they're a public company. You can get all kinds of information from them because it's required if they're a public company on the public stock exchange, what I mean, publicly listed, they have to disclose a whole bunch of information. They have to disclose financials, they have to disclose an annual report, and in that annual report, you can find out tons of information. Now, if they're a privately owned company, it's a little harder. Again, you can go to their website, you can look them up, look at what their pricing strategy is if they're listing their price. If they're not listing their price, some people will say, oh, click here for more information. Click. Put your name in. Maybe they'll contact you back and say, hey, you asked for more information. How can we help? And you'd be like, oh, I'm really interested in this product. And, I was thinking, this might be a good solution for me. What's your pricing? Ask them. You don't have to tell them you're a competitor, right? Play customer. You're just an interested potential customer for their product or service, all right? So you can do that. There's also, even for private companies, there's also a way to sometimes get inside information. And that's by looking at investor analyst reports and other websites that list investor data that would tell you that this company, and maybe it's only 1 or 2 years old, right? They're a new startup company. You can go to places like Crunchbase, which is listed over in that next block, and they'll give you certain public information about how many rounds of funding that company's gotten, how much funding that company's gotten. That might be a good indicator to let you know how far along they are, how formidable of a competitor they might be. All right. I already mentioned about Googling Amazon, Alibaba, app stores, etc. And then just over on the last block in general, other research you can do. There is tons of information that's available in government databases. Again, Adam Shambaugh can help you navigate all of these various databases. You can actually pay for access to some databases, but why do that when, if you're at Temple, you can utilize the Temple Business Library and get most of that completely for free. So definitely you would want to label that. All right. So researching your competition first would be, if you know who some of your competitors are, you can go directly to them, pretend you're a customer, ask them lots of questions, and get the kinds of information you're looking for. You can look at their websites, right? You should be doing that. So that's primary research. Secondary research would be looking at industry information, looking for articles, look at news clippings that you've seen from other websites, where they maybe done press releases about the company. If there are services or other websites that rate companies and their products and services, go look at the reviews for those products or services. Again, that would be finding information from other potential customers who are using your competitor, finding out what they like and what they don't like. And typically people talk more about what they don't like when they give reviews than what they like. So these are all great sources, great ways to come up with information about your competition. All right, let me stop there for just a second and do a check-in and see if anybody has any other questions so far. No? Okay. Okay. Let me keep going. So through all of this, at some point, you absolutely should be talking to your prospective customers, right? And if you were in our first workshop, you know that the reason for that is because you really have to understand the customers, who you think your customers are, and the problems they're experiencing. And you need to get a deep understanding of that. And the best way to do that is by firsthand talking directly to them. All right. In those discussions, learning about their problems, you may learn about who some of your competitors are, and you may learn what they really like about them and what they really don't like about them. And that's really important information for you, because when your customer's telling you they don't like something about your competitor, that should be a big red flag saying, I want to solve that problem or that issue with my product or service, right? So that if I can manage to get that customer's attention, they'll like my product better than what they're already using today. Okay, so, whoops. All right, so in the idea competition, there are 6 sections you're going to fill out. One of the sections is this idea, or oh, I'm sorry, is this section on competitors, all right, and the status quo. And that's worth 25 points in the competition. So these are the things that we're going to be asking you to answer about your competition, right? So how are your competition solving the problem today? You've identified this problem that you're going to solve. How are they solving it today? What's the approach they're taking? And then what are the issues with their current solutions? So when you've looked at what they're doing, where do you see they have problems? Again, if you're talking to prospective customers, they're going to tell you what they don't like. That's good, right? In fact, that's awesome. But you need to also take a good hard look at that. In fact, you may even want to go out and try it. Try what they're doing. I'm not suggesting you go out and buy all the competition's products or services and do it. At least not for the idea competition. But if you can get a chance to see it or use it or watch somebody else using it, why not do that? All right. And then see if you can identify any problems or issues with what they're doing. All right. And then what are all of these other areas, right? Your direct competitors, indirect alternatives, and substitutions. Who have you identified? Now, for your submission to the competition, you don't need to list 25 competitors. All right. If you Google or go to Amazon and you find out that there are 25 other companies out there providing a product that's like yours or solving the problem that you're trying to solve, please don't list all 25. All right. But what you might want to do is find out who are the top 3, your top 3 competitors, and then that's who you're going to want to focus on as part of your analysis. And it might be that you say, I've done some research, I found 25 competitors in this area, but here are the top 3 that have most of the market share. And so these are the 3 that I'm going to do my analysis on. All right. And then you need to look at what's your competitive advantage. Why are you better? What are you doing better? Why are you providing more value than your competition? All right. So they're the 4 sub-questions that you need to answer in this section about competitors. Okay. Now, what I'd like to do is let me try to take you to this website, and I want to show you just a real short video here. Hang on. Let me stop sharing. All right, so let's see if I can reshare this. And I want to show you this short video about competitive advantage. Can you see my screen? Yep, okay. And let me know, give me a thumbs up if you can hear the audio when it starts.
Hi, my name is Erica Olson. Today's whiteboard session is on competitive advantages. Now, before we get all confused about what a competitive advantage is or isn't, let's just know that it's going to take you some time to develop it. And I don't mean time such as hours expended. I mean time thinking and perhaps several years to really get to that core. So if you put it on your strategic planning agenda, competitive advantage, just know that you're going to have a conversation about it, but you may be having a conversation about it for several years until you get down to that essence. So what is a competitive advantage? It answers the question, what are you best at? So let's stop there for a moment. You don't necessarily need to be the best in the world. You may not need to be the best in your state or in your country. You just need to be better than your competitors at what you do in delivering value to your customers. Another way to think about it is, why do your customers buy from you, right? Why do they buy from you? Well, I'm here to tell you that if you have a competitive advantage clearly identified, that means you don't do anything that doesn't actually get you to customers paying for something or giving you money for a value that they want to receive in exchange for dollars, of course, right? So let's look at how we actually put a competitive advantage together. What are the components? And I really think asking this question, what are we best at? And let's not forget, really at the core, it is our DNA. It's your DNA. This is my little handy dandy formula. Your company name, I've got my example, your company name plus what you're best at and why. That why question is pretty hard. So let's take my example. Bikram yoga. Bikram yoga is a practice of yoga that is, of course, done in yoga studios. And what they're best at, they've done an amazing job at productizing the yoga experience. So what do I mean by that? They have franchises all over the United States that do exactly the same type of practice. And they were able to productize it by, again, that means setting up a pretty consistent process and a very specific yoga practice that nobody else had. And by doing so, they were able to package it and franchise it. So the folks that actually did this, their competitive advantage, and they, of course, they trademarked it as well, their competitive advantage was the ability to take something, that was a little esoteric in nature and actually put it together so that everybody in the world, if they wanted to, could buy that particular process and sell it within their community. So competitive advantage, again, as I mentioned, it's going to take you a while to get to. Ask those hard questions of yourself and your management team and keep coming back to that question of, what are we best at? And again, as you've heard me say, don't forget to ask your employees and your customers, because they can really help you answer this question better than probably you can. So Erica's tip, once you have your competitive advantage, what the heck do you do with it? It needs to be built into your strategic plan. So all of your goals and objectives and your mission and your vision all need to support the development and the reinforcement of your competitive advantage.
Okay, so I have a couple quick things that I want to just mention right out of the starting gate. So first off, do not be scared by Erica's comment about, oh, it takes years, for you to come up with what your competitive advantage is. You don't have years, you have about 3 weeks, right? 2 weeks to submit to the idea competition. Now, what she's really trying to say is many companies come up with what they think is their competitive advantage, and they work on that, they present that to customers, they get feedback from customers, and they hear things, right? They hear things back from customers that get them thinking, oh, we're not quite there yet. We need to tweak this. We need to massage it. We're going to need to evolve this. That's what she's talking about. So oftentimes, early stage ideas, you come up with what you think is your competitive advantage, and that's okay for right now, right? You're going to come up with your competitive advantage based off of what you see your other competitors are doing and how you think you're doing something better, providing more value, better than what these other people are providing, right? So for right now, that's what I'd focus on, okay? The second thing I would mention about what she said is, she mentioned about how You're going to want to tie this into your mission and your goals and objectives and your vision. Sure, once you get further down the road, and if you decide you want to take this idea and really work on turning it into a viable business. For right now, you don't need to worry about that. Okay, when she says, you know, your competitive advantage is your DNA, it's what should be at the very heart of your business. Yes, she's right, but you're probably not ready yet to launch this as a business. And so again, you don't need to worry about that aspect yet. The thing that where I really think that this video is great is in making the point that your competitive advantage really is, what are you best at and why? And this is the part she said, you know, she said the why is hard, right? Because you really have to think about how you're different and not just, you know, you could be best at something, right? And that's going to help make you different. But why are you best at that? And understanding that is really important. She also said another really good thing, which is your customers are going to help you identify what you're best at. But at this point in time, you probably don't have customers, right? Because you're still in that early idea stage. Now, when you get to the point you talk to customers about their problems and you've learned about the problems they're having and you've formulated this idea of how you want to provide a product or a service to help these people, you can also be looking for feedback from these potential customers about, if you did this, what do they like about it? How do they feel about it? Do they think this is better than something else they've already available to them today? And get feedback. And they may, even in an early stage, they may be able to give you some guidance and some tips on what you should be focused on in terms of your competitive advantage. Okay, so what else are you looking for in terms of competitors, right? So one thing is you're looking for overlaps. When you do your competitive analysis and you take your competitors, those top 2 or 3, right? And you look at what are they providing? What's the value they're providing, the benefits they're providing? You want to take a look at, well, how many of them are you also providing, right? That's, to me, that's what I call the overlaps, where you're providing the same or similar value. So there's no real advantage there, okay? But more importantly is you're looking for the gaps. Again, you're looking for, how can you add the missing or more value than what your competitors are adding? Those gaps are your real key to success, because that's what's going to take you to the point where you're satisfying customers' needs more than your competitors are satisfying them. And in fact, you may be delighting customers, right? If a customer has a certain satisfaction, they're going to buy your product and it's going to accomplish something for them, but they find out that it does it even better than what they expected. And oh, by the way, after I've used this, it's like so simple to clean up, and oh, it's recyclable. And you know, if you're providing more value and finding ways to really help them that they weren't expecting, again, there's all reasons why people will drop using what they're doing now and move over to using your solution, part of your competitive advantage. Okay, so another quick video I have that I'd like to show you is on how you do a competitive analysis. All right, now let me preface this by saying that for the idea competition, you do not have to do a pitch deck, right? Not initially. If you make it to the finals, then yeah, you're going to do a pitch deck, and you will be doing what this next video is going to talk about. But let me suggest you may want to do this anyway, right? Just for your own benefit. When you look at these other competitors, you may want to come up and do your own little competitive grid that lets you keep score on the value and the benefits you're providing compared to what your competitors are providing. And in fact, part of your idea competition submission is you can upload additional drawings, links to a video if you want to shoot a short video or something. You could potentially take this analysis and upload that as an optional thing to your submission that helps for the judges to understand exactly where you fit against your competition. As far as the basic submission goes, you're going to write it all out in 1 or 2 paragraphs. But you can also submit this as, as an optional additional thing. So let's go to this.
Before we were using Monday.com, our team was drowning.
Hang on a second.
Our days used to split between work and managing.
All right.
What are those benefits from
Hold
top
on.
to bottom?
I got to take this back to here. And I got to reshare. Okay, so this is a video that's from Dream It Ventures. They do lots of great, like really great short videos on all kinds of topics, from ideation, anything related to coming up with a startup venture, a startup idea. So let me share this and play it for you.
The first mistake I see entrepreneurs make is they truly don't even understand who the competition is. They haven't exhaustively done a search. The number of times I meet with a startup, they tell me who their competition is. I do one detailed Google search. I flip my Macintosh around and say, wait a second, what about these other 3? I haven't even mentioned them. I'll say, I don't even know who those are. I mean, did you spend any time on this issue? Don't be like an ostrich and stick your head in the sand, because you're going to get run over by a big truck. And that's going to be an investor that you meet with that knows more about the competition than you do. I mean, it's like when you were a little kid, right? And you'd be in your dark room and you're not going to open the door to the closet because if you don't look, the boogeyman won't be there. This is the boogeyman. Embrace it. Search for the competition. Make sure you understand it. Keep your ear to the ground for new competitors emerging, and embrace that with strong emotional intelligence. Now the question is, once you know that information, what do you do with it? Well, let me tell you where not to start, and that's with the magic quadrant. There is nothing magical about it. Don't use them if you're trying to differentiate. Why? Can you only differentiate on 2 axes? I mean, it's so artificial. It's complete bullshit. If you want to show how you're unique and you're different, you're not going to use a magic quadrant. It's gone, it's over, it's dead. And oh, by the way, you can throw its friend, the Venn diagram, out the window as well. I know I'm going fast. Please leave your questions in the comments and make sure to subscribe. We have a lot more coming. So we talked about what not to do. Now let's talk about what you should do. And that's going to be showing your competition in a table and grid format. Now let's break that down and talk about what you actually do inside the table. First, the columns are going to be the individual companies, and you're going to go first. And by the way, I'm assuming if you're watching this, you read and speak English. We read left to right. That means you go first in the leftmost column. The competitors go next to you going to the right. What order do those competitors go in? Pretty easy to know. If I asked you who are the top competitors your customers or investors are going to ask about first, they, in priority order, are going to be the next columns right next to you, because you're going to spend most of your time differentiating over your 2 to 3 biggest competitors. That's how you're going to handle that. Next, let's talk about what you're going to do in the rows. And those rows are going to be the benefits that you deliver, not the features. What are the benefits you're delivering to that end user or that end customer? As you talk about the benefits, another big question that comes up is, what is that order? Pretty simple. I have a question for you. What's your biggest, strongest value proposition? What's your biggest differentiator? Those are the benefits that should come at the top, and almost in a sorted order. What are those benefits from top to bottom? Strongest benefits up top, strongest differentiators up top, coming down. Next, let's talk about what do you do in the middle of the chart? Pretty straightforward. First of all, for all those benefits we talked about, try to make sure they're quantitative, not qualitative. So if you say faster, I'm going to want you to start talking about how much faster you are. Don't just use that description, faster. But as you fill out the middle of the chart, what I want you to think about is, sure, you're going to put check marks for where all the things that you have as a benefit for your particular product and maybe your competitors. But here's what I don't want you to do. Don't litter up and muck up the chart with lots of X's where it doesn't fit or the functionality isn't there, the benefit isn't there. Just leave it blank. Open up the chart, make it cleaner, make it easier to read, easier to process. If you have to, you can use Harvey balls. Like if you're 100%, it's a solid ball. If you're only 50%, it's a 50%. Or maybe there's a number in there. But if your competition doesn't have the capability, just leave it blank. And remember, you can go beyond your product when you're talking about the competition. If you have unique differentiators that really set you apart, it's related to your distribution strategy, pricing, business model, no long-term contract, put that in here as well. We see a lot of entrepreneurs that make a mistake that just talk about the product. Investors and customers often want to know other things that make you different that may seem obvious to you, but are huge differentiators. List them as well. That's it. That's how you make sure you truly understand who the competition is and that you're communicating it clearly so everyone else understands how you're different and unique from the competition. So what are your key takeaways? One, make sure you truly understand who the competition is. Number two, magic quadrant, gone, dead, in a box, buried forever, and its friend, the Venn diagram, yeah, that's in the box too. Number three, you're going to build it as a table. You've got the columns, you go first, top competitors go next to you. Coming down on the rows, it's the benefits, and they're in priority order. And remember, leave it uncluttered in the middle. Just put the check marks of the numbers where it applies. If it doesn't apply, leave the X's blank, leave them out, leave it clear. That's your Dream It Dose in about 5 minutes. I look forward to answering your questions in the comments. We'll see you next.
Okay. So I know I try to talk fast. He talks even faster than I do, but I think it's really a great video in terms of capturing what goes into doing this competitive analysis and how you might want to show it. Now, again, I just want to reiterate, this competition, we're not asking you to do that grid. We're not asking you to submit that, but I think it's a really helpful, useful tool for you to do to try to dig out what your competitive advantage is, what your added value is, so you can describe it, right, in words for the submission. And if you do that chart and you want to take that chart and then ultimately upload that as an option to your submission, you're welcome to do that. I don't think that would hurt to do that. So I would encourage you, think about that, but at least for your own benefit, you might want to go ahead and do this competitive analysis chart as a way of making sure that you're on top of it and you understand what your real benefits are. So I also, he's already talked about this, but I also want to show you an example from a previous company, right, that submitted into our competitions. So in this particular case, and maybe some of you have heard about it, Simply Good Jars, who is actually a Temple alum, Jared Cannon. Simply Good Jars is healthy, fresh salad sold in jars, and he's had some great success. He was on Shark Tank in 2021, got over $500,000 from the sharks on Shark Tank. He's signed deals with Walmart. He's signed deals with Saxby's Coffee and deals with Wawa to be selling his product through those channels. So, this guy's really starting to take off with his business. Well, this is the example of his competitive analysis chart that he did back when he was in the competition a few years ago. And you can see that he's actually followed some of the guidelines from the Dream It Ventures guy, right? He's done the grid. He did not put his company first in the first column. So that's one mistake that he made. But you'll see the rest of what he put in here is actually pretty good. So he did some X's. He didn't do check marks and X's. He didn't fill every blank, so it's not too cluttered up, okay? He also differentiated, like, the guy in the video was talking about the Harvey balls, about being 100% or 50%. What Jared did is he put numbers in to quantify. So let me go to that for just a second. Again, this is an early stage competition, so you're not going to be real focused on what investors are going to be looking for here. You're just trying to figure out how to demonstrate the value you're providing to your customers. But for the Be Your Own Boss Bowl, one of the things Jared included in here was equipment cost. Now, typically, customers not going to care about what your equipment costs to do this, right? That's your problem, not the customer's problem. But it is a concern for investors. And so what Jared was trying to show here is that one of the benefits that he had over his competition, and it was a competitive advantage, right, is that it was only going to cost $4,000 for him to put one of his vending machines into a location to sell his salads. Whereas his competition, the next closest, was going to be $7,000. And Farmer's Fridge, you can see it was going to cost them $20,000 per location. So if you were an investor and you were thinking of investing in Jared's company, that's a big competitive advantage, because it means I don't need as much upfront cash to get my product out to market, right? So that's a benefit to an investor. And you can be thinking of that the same way. There are benefits to your customers. There may be benefits to a potential investor, and you can combine them both on this chart. When the judges look at your submission, they're going to be looking at from the standpoint of how good of an idea is this, and does it have potential to eventually be turned into a business, right? And by the way, for the idea competition, it can also be not-for-profit ideas. It doesn't have to be a business that's out to make profit, all right? A lot of these things still hold true. If you were going to be partnering with somebody, they'd be looking for what are the competitive advantages for me to work with you as a partner, as opposed to me working with somebody else as a partner. And so think of partners as potential investors, right? In that they need to have a bond and a relationship. So again, just to kind of summarize this, you need to do a competitive advantage or a competitive analysis, I'm sorry, because you need to know how are you better, where do you provide more value, more benefits for your customers or your investors or your partners, okay? And you're going to need to quantify that. One easy way to do that is for you to work up your own chart like this, all right? Use it to keep score, and then it would be a great thing for you to be able to use that to then equate that to your written submission, describing the benefits, how you're better. And then if you choose to and want to upload a copy of that analysis as an optional document, you're free to do that, but you're not obligated to do that, okay? All right, any questions on that? All right. Okay, so I'm going to move over and we're going to talk a little bit about elevator pitches, and then I'm going to give you just a quick overview of the competition in case you're new to the competition and this is the first workshop that you've been on. So one of the elements for the submission for the idea competition, in fact, it's the first element, is your elevator pitch. All right, and it's only worth 5 points, but it kind of sets the tone for the rest of your submission. And just as if you were pitching to an investor or pitching to a partner, you always start off in the very beginning with like your short value proposition statement or your elevator pitch, and that sets the tone. So the elevator pitch is just really like a 60-second, what would you tell somebody about your idea that's going to get them interested and want to ask, tell me more, right? The whole goal of an elevator pitch is to get somebody to say, wow, that's really awesome. I'd like to know more about that. And then you go deeper and then you start talking about other aspects of the idea. And so think about this innovative idea competition submission the same way. You're going to put your elevator pitch in. That's the first thing that the judges are going to see. And you're going to want them to read that and then go, oh, wow, I want to know more about this idea. And then you're going to talk about the opportunity and problem, which is the second section. And then you're going to hook them in even further, because now they're going to go, oh my God, that's an awesome problem. That's a problem that needs to be solved. I can relate to that. I've had that problem maybe, right? Then you're going to want to talk about like who you're solving that problem for. And then what's your idea and how you're solving that problem. And it's just the entire process of walking them through section by section that almost is similar to whether or not, to whether you'd be actually pitching it to them. Okay, so the term elevator pitch comes from, if you were going to take an elevator ride up a couple of floors, it might take you 30 to 60 seconds. That's about how much time it takes to do an elevator pitch. All right, and it's typically structured as a very simple story like this. So these people, whoever your target customers are, have this problem, which is describing the problem they have, and that costs them this much to solve. That's an element that you can put in or you can leave out. All right. And then, of course, it's I have this thing, I have this product or this service that solves this problem, and this is how I do it. This is how I'm providing value to my customers and solving their problem, right? And then others can't do this because, and here barriers are barriers for why other competitors don't or can't solve the problem the same way you do, right? It's not barriers for you to solve the problem. It's barriers that others might have solving the problem as good as you do. Okay, and then here's how I make it, or here's how I do it, would be a little deeper dive in what you do that solves that problem. All right, so that's one formula, one way to come at it. All right, and when you're doing an elevator pitch, so like when you're submitting to the idea competition, you're going to want to assume that your audience knows nothing about your problem that you're solving. All right, don't make the mistake by using a lot of jargon, by using a lot of acronyms that people may not know. It's better to be pretty basic, pretty simple, spell it out, because not everybody's going to be familiar with the acronyms that might be common knowledge in this industry, but to the outsider, they'd have no clue. All right. You're going to want to be some basic rules, right? In order to have a good elevator pitch, you want to keep things very simple, easy to understand. And that's a lot harder than you think. You know, you're going to want to be, as it says, clear, concise, okay, and compelling. Again, it's meant to capture their attention and want to ask you more, right? You need to be action-oriented language. So think in terms of what you do, how you do it, not in terms, don't use passive language when you're trying to develop an elevator pitch, all right? You also want to make sure you clearly tell people what that problem is you're solving. And you'd be surprised how many people really struggle with that. They can describe their solution in great detail, but they struggle when it comes to defining exactly what the problem is they're solving and who they're solving it for. All right, and again, you want to make sure that it's going to be interesting, that they're going to want to ask you, tell me more. And you want to avoid using technical jargon. Okay, I already said steer clear of acronyms or analogies. Try to be very basic, very simple. Okay. Now, let me give you an example of a bad elevator pitch, right? And that's when people start to use a lot of what I'll call buzzwords. All right. So StartCo enables members to capitalize on their existing social network. What's that? To safely monetize underutilized assets. What? Underutilized assets? That could be anything. And monetizing underutilized assets, exactly what do you mean by that again? To find and access available assets. Well, now we're talking assets again. What kind of assets? And strengthen their social ties. Well, are social ties different than social networks? Through real life exchanges. What other kind of exchanges are there? And what do they mean by real life? So this sounds great. It's like a lot of buzzwords, a lot of things strung together. But honestly, if somebody was to hit you with this as an elevator pitch, I know I personally would be just scratching my head saying, I do not know what the heck you mean by that. Could you just say it in plain English for me? All right. So give you another example of what that looks like. Whoops. Let's see if we can get this to play. No, it's not going to. All right, I'm going to skip through that for time's sake. All right. So in the slide deck, let me go back. In the slide deck, there's a video that you can watch on your own time. And it's really just an example of people in an elevator trying to do elevator pitches and how confusing it can be when in fact they use lots of buzzwords and a lot of technical jargon. And so again, you can watch that on your own time and see what that's like. So let's talk about, another way to create elevator pitches. So this is another formula. This formula, I think, is a little better than that first one that I showed you slides ago. And this is called the Mad Libs formula. And that's that, our company, the name of your company, whatever that may be, is and you want to provide what it is that you are, what it is that you're going to do, that's developing whatever your product offering is, okay, whether it's a product, whether it's a service, and then you're going to help a defined audience. That's who is your target customer audience. Who is it that really you can put in here that's going to quickly and easily describe the people, the group of people that you're trying to target to buy your product or service, okay? And then also to solve a problem. So here's your problem definition again. You need to be able to clearly state what that problem definition is, and then either with or by, and then it's how do you do that? What's special? What's different? How is it that you're solving that problem? All right, so that's called the Mad Libs formula. Again, you'll see all of the same tips that I mentioned before about being clear and concise, avoiding technical jargon, being specific about who the individual buyer might be, that group of buyers are. All right, this is a great guideline, and it's a tremendous way to build your initial elevator pitch. Now, if I was to fill in all these blanks, and if I was to read this, it might only take me 10, 15 seconds at the most, right? And elevator pitches are typically 30 to 60 seconds long. So it's okay to have a second and a third sentence to back this up. If you want to have just one sentence as your elevator pitch, that's fine. It should be really compelling, though, and it should really make people want to know more. Typically, people will have to have 2 or 3 sentences, all right? If it turns into an entire 2 or 3 paragraphs for your elevator pitch, it's way too long. So you don't want it to be that long. All right, so here's that elevator pitch that I mentioned before, lots of jargon, not very clear, easy to understand. Here's a different version of that. So Startco's an internet service company. Well, I know what that is, okay? That's developing an online marketplace. Yep, I know what that is too. That helps hip professionals gain access to desirable vacation properties. Oh, sorry, let me share my screen. Thanks for letting me know. Whoops. So let me go back just for a second. So this is what I was showing that maybe didn't come through before. And that's this Mad Libs elevator pitch. All right. So it's a very simple way of filling in the blanks. Again, all of these notes on the right-hand side, we've already covered on the other slide. All right. And then this is that elevator pitch I read to you a minute ago. And here's the revised elevator pitch. So an internet service company developing an online marketplace, hip professionals gain access to desirable vacation properties. Well, that makes a whole lot more sense than access available assets, which was really vague, right? That could have been anything. Okay, while earning money from their own property by taking advantage of their social network. All right. For the idea competition, I'd encourage you to come up with an elevator pitch, and then you're going to want to bounce that off all your friends, all your family, bounce it off strangers, right? People that don't necessarily know what your idea is. Read it to them, share it with them, and then have them tell you what they think it means. If they can't tell you what it means, then you're still not there. You need to get to the point where they can explain back to you what your idea is to show that they were able to take it, understand it, and repeat it. All right. That's the best way to test that you've got a good solid elevator pitch. All right. So another example of how an elevator pitch can play out. I work on nanotechnology to deliver medical therapies to targeted cells. Okay, if you weren't in the medical industry, right, or health, you might not know what targeted cells are. Okay, and medical therapies, I don't know what medical therapies or nanotechnology is. All right, but you might understand we're using manufacturing techniques of the computer industry to make better vaccines. Okay, that might be easier for most people to understand. Again, one way to test that would be read that first statement to 10 people and see if they could really explain back to you what it is that you want it to mean. And if they can't, then you need to figure out an easier way to pitch this so that people would understand it. And as silly as it may sound, typically we tell people you should be aiming at about an 8th grade level. All right, so 8th grade is about the level you want this to be so that people can really understand it. All right. So another template to consider, and I'm just going to put it up here. These will be in the slides. You can go and look at this slide deck again after the workshop, and you can use any of these forms of templates. And again, here it's, for your targeted customer, whoever that is, who has a need, the problem you're solving. My idea is whatever it is, and one key benefit to it is X. And that key benefit is, the highest value contributor that you're offering from your solution. And then unlike our competition, and it's okay to name who your biggest competitor is, right? Our solution is different or has this unique differentiator, your competitive advantage, right? So that's another template that you can use, right? So for movie buffs who rent DVDs, Netflix is an online service that simplifies the whole process. Unlike Blockbuster, our solution offers a larger selection, door-to-door delivery, no late fees. So this is a little bit dated because while Netflix still offers door-to-door, the bulk of their business is streaming, right? But back then, that was their key differentiator, was no late fees. All right, so you can have a great idea, all right? But here are some tips for you, and I'll close off with this. Here's some tips for you on things you need to think about of how you can go from being an applicant to how you can be a winner in the innovative idea competition. Keep your elevator pitch clear and concise. Make sure it includes your value proposition and who benefits from it. So who your target customer is. Okay. Make sure your opportunity is clearly explained and that the problem's worthwhile. So if you're solving a problem for a group of people in the United States and it's maybe 1,000 people, it's not that that's not worthwhile. It's just that could you be working on a problem and trying to solve a bigger problem that would have a bigger impact on more people? Even if you're a not-for-profit, right? Is there a way to expand your reach that you could help more people and have a bigger impact? All right. And then your users and customers, make sure they're clearly identified. And sometimes customers and users are not the same people, right? So I'll give you an example of that. When you go to a grocery store and a parent has their child in the cart and they're going down the aisle and the child starts pointing to their favorite cereal and the parent picks the one off the shelf and sticks it in the cart, one of them is the customer and the other one is the user. So the user is the child, right? He's the one that's going to eat the cereal. But the customer is the parent who's buying that cereal. And that holds true in a lot of different instances, right? Sometimes the person buying the product or service isn't the same person that's going to be using it. So make sure if that's the case, you understand that okay? And then also, it's good for you in your submission to relate, how do you know that? Like, how do you know that this is a problem? Have you validated that with other people? How did you validate that? Did you do surveys? Did you talk to customers? Did you do research? If you can back up how you know this is an important problem to solve and that this group of people have this problem, tell us how you know that. How did you come to learn that? All right, some other tips, okay, make sure your idea is easy to understand. Here's my idea, here's how it works. And make sure it's realistically feasible, all right? I once had a student who was, looking to develop an app to transfer power from one cell phone to another cell phone through the app. And I asked them, well, what's the technology you're using to do that? And they said, oh, I'm using the app. Well, but there is no app. There is no way to transfer power from an app to an app on another phone. Now, you can put the two phones together. There's technology for that now, where you could transfer between two phones. You can put two cables between two phones, and you can transfer power that way. There is technology to do it, but there isn't, just because you say there's an app to make this happen doesn't mean that it's going to work. And you have to at least be able to back up that there is a technology, even if you're not an expert in it, but that there is a technology, here's where it's being used, okay? And that you're going to plan to use that same kind of technology as part of your solution. So it has to be feasible, okay? You're going to demonstrate that you know who the competition is, you know where they're strong, you know where they're weak, and you know how to fill the gaps. You know how to provide more value than the rest of them. And if you can be unique and better, that's even better. All right. Last but not least is you want to be able to make sure that you have identified some challenges and some unknowns that you've discovered, okay? And then also, what's your plan to resolve them? You don't have to have all the answers, but you need to have at least thought through how you're planning to address these problems, right? So there may be some unknowns about the technology. What are you going to do to go get answers to those? Where would you go? Who might you talk to try to get answers to those unknowns? Or there might be some particular challenges on how you would have it made. You might say, I'm not really sure how I'm going to manufacture this. I'm going to have to research manufacturing locations in the US, manufacturing locations offshore. That's okay. Again, you don't have to have all the answers to these, but you need to have at least some simple plan of how you're going to plan to go address these issues. All right, that's it. I'm going to stop there real quickly. Any questions on the last bit about elevator pitches? No? All right. So just for anybody that's interested in the rest of the competition, the portal is open on Startup Tree that you can actually go in and start to create your application. The submission deadline's on the 19th. Finalists will be announced November 4th after we do the first round of judging. And then the live pitch competition is going to be on November 17th from 4 to 6. It's always a really fun event to come out and watch, hear these great ideas. If you're one of the finalists, awesome. If you're not, you can still come out and watch it. Prize money, over $6,000 in prizes. There's an upper track for graduate students, faculty, staff, and alumni, and then there's an undergraduate track specifically for undergraduates. You can work singly, you can work as a team, and then there's additional awards for the People's Choice Global Innovation and the Digital Innovation Award. All right, we have mentors for you. Please take advantage of our mentors on Startup Tree. You can book appointments with them. Next Wednesday from 12 to 1, our Entrepreneurial Student Association is going to be doing a peer mentoring event. The following Monday night will be your last opportunity to meet with expert mentors. We'll have some of our expert mentors from Startup Tree on a live Zoom. You'll be able to go into breakout rooms with as many mentors as you'd like. If there's 6 there that night, you can go talk to all 6 of them, bounce your ideas off of them, get feedback on them. This is your last opportunity to tweak your idea before you submit. Again, these are the 6 categories that we're going to rate your submissions and the point values. You're going to submit on Startup Tree. This is the web page in Startup Tree where you're going to go to enter, create your draft entry, save it. That way we know that you're interested in entering. You can go back anytime when you're ready, when you feel you're ready to upload your final entry, you can upload it and then hit the submit button. Okay, this is what the entry looks like. Okay, at least the beginning of the entry, right? Develop your content in a Word document. That'll make it easy to cut and paste and put it into the answer blocks in the actual Startup Tree application. Please don't wait until the last day in case there's any problems in the portal. There are optional areas for you to upload pictures, diagrams. You also can upload a link to a video if you want to have a short video that helps to explain your idea. You're welcome to do that. And then it's optional to apply to the Digital Innovation Award and the Global Innovation Award. Okay, you do not have to be considered for those, but if you qualify, why not, right? It's potentially extra money that you could win for your idea. And last but not least, if you'd be so kind to take a quick survey, let us know how you liked this workshop. And then also, if you're here for suitable points tonight, this is the QR code for the suitable points. And with that, I'm done. Thanks for coming. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to stay on to answer any questions.